They said a crippled girl had no place on the frontier, that she was nothing more than dead weight in a world built for the strong. When her father's blood soaked into the floorboards of their store, Eliza Hartwell learned the cruelest truth. Mercy dies with your protector. The town of Willow Ridge had already decided her fate before the body went cold. But then a stranger rode in, a cowboy with secrets darker than the scars on his hands, and everything changed. This is the story of the girl nobody wanted and the man who refused to leave her behind. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what happens next will break your heart and put it back together again. The first shot shattered the morning like breaking glass. Eliza Hartwell's hands froze over the ledger, ink spreading across the page where her pen had slipped. The numbers she'd been recording, $3.20 for flour, $1.50 for coffee, suddenly meant nothing. Her father's voice, steady and calm just moments before, cut off mid-sentence. Then came the second shot. "Papa?" The word caught in her throat. She was in the back room of Hartwell's general store, surrounded by crates of supplies and the familiar smell of tobacco and dried beans. The wooden crutches leaning against her chair were within reach, but her legs, twisted and scarred from the riding accident that had nearly killed her at 15, wouldn't move fast enough. They never did. "Give us the money, old man!" A voice she didn't recognize, rough as gravel, echoed from the front of the store. "There's nothing here worth dying for," her father said, and Eliza heard something she'd never heard before in William Hartwell's voice. Fear. Not for himself. Her father had never been afraid for himself. This was the fear of a man who knew his daughter was 20 feet away, helpless, listening. She grabbed the crutches and pulled herself upright, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The backroom door was partially open, just enough for her to see shadows moving in the morning light that streamed through the store's front windows. "We know you keep the week's take in that strongbox." A different voice, younger. "We've been watching." Eliza pressed herself against the doorframe. Through the gap, she could see her father standing behind the counter, his weathered hands raised to shoulder height. He was 62 years old, with silver hair and the kind of lined face that came from decades of honest work and mountain sun. Two men stood facing him, both with bandanas covering the lower halves of their faces. One held a revolver pointed directly at her father's chest. "Please," William said quietly, "just take what you want and go." The man with the gun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's exactly what we're going to do." Eliza's mind raced. The sheriff's office was 3 blocks away. If she could get out the back door, if she could make it to the street, if someone was passing by, but even as she thought it, she knew it was impossible. On her crutches, moving as quietly as possible, it would take her minutes to navigate the storage room, unlock the back door, and make it outside. Minutes her father didn't have. "The strongbox is under the counter," William said. "I'll get it for you." Slowly, the gunman gestured with his weapon. Real slowly. William lowered his hands and bent down, disappearing from Eliza's limited view. She heard the scrape of metal on wood, then her father rose again with the iron strongbox in his hands. It was small, no bigger than a bread box, with a simple lock that Eliza herself had opened 100 times. "Here," William set it on the counter. "Take it. There's maybe $100 inside." That's the truth. The second man, the younger one, moved forward and grabbed the box. He pulled a knife from his belt and jammed it into the lock, twisting violently. The mechanism gave way with a crack. Inside were bills and coins, the accumulated earnings from a week of selling supplies to miners, ranchers, and townsfolk. $100 was a fortune to some, barely enough to matter to others. To the Hartwells, it represented survival, money for inventory, for the mortgage on the building, for food and medicine and all the small expenses that kept them alive in Willow Ridge. $100. The younger man's voice dripped with disgust. He looked up at William. "You think we're stupid? Where's the rest?" "That's all there is," William said. "I swear it." The gunman took a step closer. "You're lying." "I'm not. Business has been slow. The miners up at Silver Creek haven't been paid yet this month. When they get their wages, they'll come in and—" The gunshot was so loud in the enclosed space that Eliza screamed. Her father staggered backward, his hand going to his chest. Red bloomed across his shirt, spreading like spilled wine. He hit the shelf behind him and knocked over a display of canned goods. Tin cans clattered to the floor, rolling in every direction. "Papa!" Eliza shoved the door open and lurched into the main room, her crutches skidding on the wooden floor. Both outlaws spun toward her. For a frozen moment, they all stared at each other. The crippled girl in the doorway, the two killers caught in the act. She saw their eyes above the bandanas, saw the calculation happening there. "There's another one," the younger man said. William Hartwell, still on his feet despite the blood soaking his shirt, lurched toward the counter. "Run, Eliza! Run!" But running was the one thing Eliza Hartwell could not do. The gunman raised his weapon again, this time pointing it at her. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the moment when he decided she wasn't worth the bullet, and then he shifted his aim back to her father. "No!" Eliza threw herself forward, her crutch swinging wild. The second shot took William Hartwell in the throat. He went down hard, his body crumpling behind the counter like a puppet with cut strings. The sound he made, a wet, choking gurgle, would haunt Eliza for the rest of her life. The two outlaws grabbed the strongbox and ran. Eliza half fell, half crawled to her father's side. Blood was everywhere, hot and sticky, soaking into the sawdust that covered the floor. She pressed her hands to his chest, to his throat, anywhere she could reach, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. "Papa, hold on, please, I'll get help, But William Hartwell's eyes were already glazing over. His hand, slippery with blood, found hers and squeezed once, weakly. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear. "What? Papa, what?" Eliza leaned closer, her tears falling on his face. "Love. You?" The words were barely a whisper, more breath than sound. Then he was gone. Eliza knelt there on the blood-soaked floor, holding her father's hand, and screamed until her voice gave out. By the time the sheriff and his deputies arrived, drawn by the gunshots and her cries, she had gone silent. She sat with her back against the counter, her useless legs stretched out in front of her, her father's body cradled in her lap. Sheriff Tom Briggs, a heavy-set man with tobacco-stained whiskers, took one look at the scene and cursed. "Who did this?" Eliza's voice came out flat, dead. "Two men, bandanas. They took the strongbox." "Did you recognize them? Anything about their voices, their clothes?" She shook her head. What did it matter? Her father was dead. Recognition wouldn't bring him back. Doc Morrison arrived next, his medical bag in hand, but there was nothing for him to do except confirm what everyone could already see. After a respectful pause, two deputies lifted William Hartwell's body and carried it out to the undertaker's wagon. Eliza watched them go, still sitting on the floor, unable or unwilling to move. "Miss Hartwell?" The sheriff crouched beside her, his knees popping. "I'm powerful sorry about your pa. He was a good man." "Yes." "Is there someone I can fetch for you? Someone who can sit with you?" Eliza almost laughed. "Who?" She had no family left. Her mother had died giving birth to a stillborn son when Eliza was 10. She had no siblings, no aunts or uncles in Willow Ridge. Her father had been everything: parent, protector, business partner, friend. "No," she said, "there's no one." The sheriff's discomfort was palpable. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat. "Well, you can't stay here. Not tonight. This ain't a fit place for a lady right now. This is my home. I know, but..." He gestured at the blood. "Let me have Mrs. Briggs make up a room for you. Just for tonight. You can come back tomorrow when the place has been cleaned." Eliza wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd sleep in the blood if she had to, but she was so tired, every bone in her body felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with lead. She nodded. It took 3 men to get her up off the floor, get her crutches situated, and help her out to the sheriff's wagon. As they pulled away from the store, Eliza looked back. The windows were dark now, the open sign still hanging on the door. Her father's blood was seeping between the floorboards. Everything is gone, she thought. Everything. She had no idea how right she was. The funeral was held 2 days later on a gray morning that threatened rain. Half the town turned out, not because they'd been particularly close to William Hartwell, but because death on the frontier was a communal affair. Everyone would die eventually. The least you could do was show up when someone went ahead of you. Eliza sat in the front pew of the small church, her crutches leaning beside her. She wore her only black dress, let out at the seams by Mrs. Briggs to fit her now that she was 24 instead of 15, the last time she'd needed mourning clothes. Around her, the townspeople sang hymns and listened to Pastor Williams deliver platitudes about eternal rest and heavenly reward. She didn't hear any of it. What she heard were the whispers. They'd started the moment she arrived, soft and sibilant, like the hiss of snakes. Poor thing, what will she do now? She can't run the store by herself, not in her condition. Someone will have to take care of her. But who? She's got no family. Eliza kept her eyes fixed on the plain wooden coffin at the front of the church. Inside it, her father lay in his best suit, his hands folded across his chest. The undertaker had done a decent job cleaning him up, but Eliza couldn't unsee the blood, couldn't unfeel the weight of his body going limp in her arms. After the service, they processed to the cemetery on the hill overlooking town. The grave had been dug beside Eliza's mother's plot, a reunion in death, if you believed in such things. Eliza wasn't sure what she believed anymore. As the coffin was lowered into the earth, she heard more whispers. She'll have to sell the store, of course. Who'd buy it? Place is probably cursed now. The bank will foreclose, mark my words. When the last shovel of dirt had been thrown and the last prayer said, people began to drift away. A few offered their condolences to Eliza, quick, awkward words accompanied by even more awkward pats on the shoulder. Most simply avoided her eyes. Then Thomas Blackwood approached. Blackwood was one of Willow Ridge's town councilmen, a prosperous merchant who owned the competing general store on the other side of town. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having known real hardship. "Miss Hartwell," he said, removing his hat, "my deepest sympathies." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I wonder if I might have a word with you about your situation." Eliza's hands tightened on her crutches. "What situation is that?" "Well," he glanced around as if checking to make sure others were listening. They were. "The matter of your father's store and your own circumstances." "My circumstances," Eliza repeated, her voice flat. "The council has been discussing it, and we believe it would be best, for everyone, you understand, if arrangements were made for your care. Proper arrangements." "I don't need arrangements. I have a home and a business." Blackwood's smile was practiced, patronizing. "Miss Hartwell, please be reasonable. You can't possibly run the store alone, and frankly, the property is valuable. Your father had debts. My father's debts are manageable. The store turns a profit. Perhaps it did when your father was alive to manage it. But now?" He shook his head, the very picture of concerned reasonableness. "A young woman, alone with your limitations. It's simply not practical. The council believes the best course of action would be to sell the property, settle the debts, and use the remaining funds to secure your placement at the state institution in Denver. They have excellent facilities there for people with special needs." The words hit her like a physical blow. An institution. They wanted to lock her away in some miserable building full of the sick and unwanted, out of sight and out of mind. "I don't have special needs, Mr. Blackwood. I have injured legs. My mind works perfectly well." "Of course. Of course. No one is suggesting otherwise. But you must see," he gestured at her crutches. "You can't take care of yourself. Not really. And there's no one here who can properly look after you. I've been taking care of myself for 9 years. I keep the books for the store. I manage inventory. You hobble around a shop while your father did the real work," Blackwood interrupted, his false kindness slipping. "Let's not pretend otherwise. You're a burden, Miss Hartwell, and now that your father is gone, that burden falls to the town. The council has a responsibility to handle this situation in the most practical manner." Other council members were gathering now. Mayor Walsh, Reverend Williams, and Samuel Gates, the banker. They formed a wall of respectability, of civic duty, of men who knew what was best. "The decision has been made," Mayor Walsh said. "We'll give you a week to gather your personal belongings. The store and property will be auctioned to settle debts. You'll be on the Denver stage 2 weeks from today." Eliza looked from one face to another, searching for any hint of compassion, any willingness to listen. She found nothing but determination and discomfort. They'd already decided. She was damaged goods, a problem to be solved, a burden to be removed. "You can't do this," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "That's my home. My father built that business from nothing." "And now he's gone," Blackwood said bluntly. "You have to face reality, girl. The frontier is no place for cripples." The word hung in the air like a curse. Several of the townspeople who'd been lingering nearby looked away, embarrassed but not disagreeing. This was how it was, their silence said. This was how it had to be. Eliza felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, that had already shattered when her father died. This was something deeper, some last fragile hope that the world might be fair, that people might be kind, that her life might be worth something despite her broken body. "I won't go," she whispered. "You don't have a choice," Mayor Walsh said, not unkindly. "We'll make this as easy on you as we can, but the decision is final." They left her there, standing beside her father's fresh grave, with her crutches sinking slowly into the soft earth. The few remaining townspeople drifted away, their duty done, their consciences clear. She was alone. The first drops of rain began to fall. Eliza spent that night in the room above the store, surrounded by her father's things. His coat still hung on the hook by the door. His tobacco pouch sat on the table, half full. The imprint of his head was still visible on his pillow. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window and watched the rain turn the street into a river of mud. In 2 weeks, she'd be gone from this place. In 2 weeks, everything her father had built would belong to someone else. In 2 weeks, she'd be locked away in an institution, treated like a child or an invalid, forgotten. No. The thought came from somewhere deep and fierce inside her. No. She wouldn't accept this. She couldn't. But what choice did she have? The council controlled everything. They could evict her, sell the property, ship her off to Denver. She had no legal standing, no money beyond what was in the store's accounts, no family to speak for her. She was exactly what Blackwood had called her, a burden. The rain fell harder. Eliza pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. "I don't know what to do, Papa," she whispered. "Tell me what to do." But her father was gone, and the dead offered no counsel. Morning came gray and cold. Eliza woke slumped in the chair by the window, her neck stiff and her legs aching. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and dripping. She made herself get up, get dressed, go through the motions of living. The store was closed, would remain closed according to the council's orders, until the auction. But Eliza unlocked it anyway and went inside. Someone had cleaned up the blood while she was at the sheriff's house that first night. The floor was spotless, the overturned shelves righted, the scattered cans returned to their places. It looked exactly as it had before the robbery, except for the emptiness. Her father wasn't behind the counter. He'd never be behind the counter again. Eliza took her usual seat at the small desk where she kept the ledgers and stared at the columns of numbers. Everything was here: receipts, orders, accounts payable and receivable. The business was sound. Her father had been a careful man, never overextending, always planning for lean times. With proper management, the store could provide a modest but reliable income for years. But no one believed she could provide that management. The door opened with a jingle of bells. Eliza looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that the store was closed, and found herself facing a stranger. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, hard build of a man who lived in the saddle. His clothes were worn but clean: denim pants, a faded blue shirt, a leather vest scarred with age and use. A gun hung low on his hip, tied down like he knew how to use it. His face was weathered, probably in his mid-30s, with eyes the color of creek water, and a few days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw. But what struck Eliza most was the way he looked at her. Not with pity, not with disgust, not with the calculation of someone measuring her worth and finding it wanting. He simply looked at her the way you'd look at any other person. "We're closed," Eliza said. Door was unlocked. His voice was low, rough at the edges. "I'm looking for supplies, trail rations, coffee, ammunition, if you've got it." "The store's closed," she repeated. There's another general store on... I know about Blackwood's place. I'd rather give my money to someone else. Eliza studied him. You know Mr. Blackwood? Met him yesterday when I rode in. Didn't care for him much. The stranger stepped further into the store, his boots quiet on the floorboards. He glanced around with the air of someone cataloging inventory. Heard about what happened here. Your father. I'm sorry. Thank you. Also heard the council's planning to run you out. Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. News travels fast. Small town. Walls have ears. He picked up a can of peaches, examined it, set it back precisely where it had been. Seems to me a woman who can keep books and manage inventory can run a store just fine. Legs don't have much to do with it. Something in Eliza's chest loosened, just a fraction. You'd think that. The council disagrees. The council sounds like a pack of fools. Despite everything, Eliza felt the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. Are you always this blunt with strangers? Generally, yes. He turned to face her fully. Name's Caleb Rowe. I'm a drover, mostly. Move cattle up from Texas to the railheads, sometimes work as a ranch hand or trail guide. I've been on the trail for 3 months, and I'm low on supplies. If you'll sell to me, I'll buy. If not, I'll move on. There was something almost hypnotic about his directness. No pretense, no games, just plain speaking. Eliza found herself wanting to trust him, which was dangerous. She'd learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Why do you care about giving your money to me instead of Blackwood? Caleb shrugged. Like I said, didn't care for him. Plus, I've got a stubborn streak. When I see someone getting pushed around for no good reason, it rubs me wrong. You don't even know me. Don't have to. I know injustice when I see it. He paused. Look, I'm not asking for charity, and I'm not offering any. Just commerce. You've got what I need, I've got money. Simple as that. Eliza considered. The council had told her to keep the store closed, but they didn't own it yet. Not for another 2 weeks. Until then, it was still hers, still her father's legacy. Why shouldn't she sell to whoever walked through the door? All right, she said. Tell me what you need. They spent the next 20 minutes assembling supplies. Caleb proved to be a knowledgeable buyer, selecting items with care, asking intelligent questions about quality and price. He moved through the store with an easy competence, reaching high shelves without being asked, gathering items into a neat pile on the counter. Eliza tallied everything in the ledger, her pen scratching across paper. When she announced the total, $12.30, Caleb counted out coins without hesitation. You're good at this, he said as she recorded the transaction. I've been doing it since I was 15. The accident. It wasn't a question. Eliza's pen paused. Most people never mentioned it directly, preferring to dance around the subject with euphemisms and averted eyes. How did you know? You move like someone who used to move different, someone who remembers what it was like before. He gathered his purchases. I've seen men after the war with the same look. Bodies changed, but minds remembering. It was perhaps the most accurate description Eliza had ever heard. She did remember. Every single day she remembered running through fields, riding horses, dancing at the harvest festival, and every single day she felt the phantom echo of those movements, forever out of reach. You're observant, she said quietly. Pays to be. Caleb hefted his supplies. I appreciate the business, Miss Hartwell. I expect I'll be in town a few more days. Mind if I come back if I need anything else? The store will probably be closed. The council doesn't own it yet. He met her eyes. Until they do, seems to me you've got every right to run your business as you see fit. With that, he touched the brim of his hat and walked out. Eliza sat alone in the empty store, staring at the $12.30 on the counter. It wasn't much. It wouldn't save her. But it was something. A small act of rebellion, a tiny assertion of her right to exist in this space. She opened the ledger and made a note in her neat, precise handwriting. Sale to C. Rowe, $12.30, paid in full. Then she underlined it twice. For the next 3 days, Eliza continued to open the store. Not all day, she didn't have the energy for that, but for a few hours each morning. A handful of customers trickled in, Mostly people who'd known her father and felt some loyalty to his memory. She sold flour and sugar, nails and rope, coffee and tobacco. The amounts were small, but they added up. On the fourth day, Thomas Blackwood arrived. He barged through the door without knocking, his face red with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Eliza, who'd been organizing the dry goods shelf, turned slowly on her crutches. "Running my store." "The council ordered you to close it." "The council suggested I close it. They don't own it yet." "You're interfering with the auction process. This is obstruction of—" "This is my property, Mr. Blackwood, and I'll operate it as I see fit until the day you pry the deed from my hands." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good." He stepped closer, looming over her. Eliza refused to back down, though her heart hammered in her chest. This was a powerful man, a man used to getting his way, a man who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle. "Listen to me, girl," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're going to Denver whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you go quietly or whether we have to drag you onto that stage. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure it's the latter." "You'd manhandle a crippled woman in front of the whole town?" Eliza kept her voice steady, though inside she was shaking. "That would look wonderful for your reputation, Mr. Blackwood." His hand twitched, and for a moment she thought he might actually strike her. But then footsteps sounded on the boardwalk outside, and Blackwood took a deliberate step back. Caleb Rowe walked in. He took in the scene, Blackwood standing over Eliza, her white-knuckled grip on her crutches, the tension crackling in the air, and his expression went very still. "There a problem here?" he asked mildly. "This is none of your concern, Drifter," Blackwood snapped. "Seems like it might be, seeing as how I'm a customer." Caleb moved to stand beside Eliza, not touching her, but close enough to make his position clear. "Miss Hartwell, you all right?" "I'm fine," Eliza said, though her voice shook slightly. Caleb looked at Blackwood. "Then maybe you should leave. Store's open for business, not for harassment." "You don't know what you're interfering with." "Don't much care either." The two men stared at each other. Blackwood was soft from years of prosperity, while Caleb had the coiled readiness of a man who'd survived by being harder and faster than whoever was trying to kill him. It wasn't a fair match, and everyone in the room knew it. Blackwood backed down first. "This isn't over," he said to Eliza. 2 weeks. That's all you've got." He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Eliza sagged against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "Thank you," she said to Caleb. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He studied her with those calm creek water eyes. "He was about to put his hands on you." "He wouldn't have. Not with witnesses. Maybe not today, but men like that, they push until someone pushes back." Caleb leaned against the counter. "I meant what I said before. This is an injustice. You're being railroaded because you don't fit their idea of what a woman should be, what a business owner should be. It's wrong." Eliza laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Wrong doesn't matter much when you're powerless. You're not powerless. I'm a crippled woman with no family, no money, and no legal standing. What would you call that?" "I'd call it someone who needs an ally." Caleb straightened. "What if I told the council I'm your business partner?" Eliza stared at him. "What?" "Your business partner. We've been working together for months. I've been the one doing the heavy lifting, moving inventory, making deliveries. You've been managing the books and the finances. Together, we run this place. That's why the store's been so successful." "That's a lie." "That's a strategy." He smiled slightly. "You think the council's playing fair? They're not. So why should you?" "They'll never believe it. They know my father ran this store alone." "Did they? Your father was getting on in years. Makes sense he'd have taken on a silent partner to handle the physical labor. And once he died, makes sense that partner would step forward to keep the business running with the daughter who knows the books." Eliza's mind raced. It was audacious, crazy, and completely transparent. The council would see right through it. But then again, what if they didn't? What if the mere existence of a male partner, someone deemed capable by frontier standards, was enough to change their calculation? "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You don't know me. This isn't your fight." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Let's just say I know what it's like to be judged for things outside your control. And I know what it's like when no one stands up for you. I'm standing up for you, Miss Hartwell. Question is, will you let me? It was a risk. He could be a con artist, planning to swindle her out of what little she had. He could be unstable, dangerous. But when Eliza looked into his eyes, she didn't see deception. She saw something she recognized: loneliness. The loneliness of someone who'd been on the outside for too long. Maybe that's why she said yes. All right, Eliza whispered. Partners. Caleb's smile was small but genuine. Partners. Now, let's go talk to the council before they get that auction notice posted.
Who?
The town council met in the back room of Mayor Walsh's hotel, a space that smelled of cigar smoke and self-importance. When Eliza and Caleb walked in, or rather when Caleb walked in and Eliza hobbled in on her crutches, the conversation died. Mayor Walsh looked up from the papers he'd been reviewing. Miss Hartwell, this is a closed meeting. I'm aware, but you're discussing my property, so I have a right to be here. Eliza moved to the table, Caleb at her side. I'm here to inform you that the store will not be sold. I'll be keeping it and continuing to operate it. Thomas Blackwood laughed outright. We've been over this. You can't. She can, Caleb interrupted, because she's not doing it alone. I'm Caleb Rowe, Miss Hartwell's business partner. I've been working with William Hartwell for the past 6 months, helping with deliveries, inventory, and the physical demands of running a frontier store. Now that William's gone, I'll be stepping into his role while Miss Hartwell continues to manage the finances and record keeping. The silence that followed was profound. Reverend Williams found his voice first. Business partner, we've never heard of you. That's because William preferred to keep the arrangement quiet. He was a private man. Caleb's tone was perfectly reasonable. But I can show you receipts, delivery records, anything you need to verify my involvement. He couldn't, of course, but the council didn't know that. Samuel Gates, the banker, leaned forward. Even if this is true, and I have serious doubts, it doesn't change the fundamental problem. A woman can't run a business, partner or no partner. Why not? Caleb asked. It's not proper. Ma'am over at the boarding house runs a business, so does the milliner and the woman who owns the laundry. Seems to me women run plenty of businesses in Willow Ridge when no one's trying to stop them. Mayor Walsh cleared his throat. Those are different circumstances. How? Miss Hartwell has special needs. Miss Hartwell has injured legs, Caleb said flatly. Her mind is sharp, her skills are solid, and she's been managing that store's books for 9 years. The only special need she has is for people to stop trying to steal her property. Blackwood's face went purple. Now you listen here. No, you listen. Caleb's voice went hard. You want that store because it's valuable. Prime location, established customer base, low overhead. With William dead and his daughter deemed incapable, you figured you'd snap it up cheap at auction. Well, it's not happening. The store stays with its rightful owner. This is ridiculous, Blackwood sputtered. Mayor, you can't possibly. But Mayor Walsh was studying Caleb with new eyes. This wasn't some drifter they could intimidate and send packing. This was a man who knew the law, who could make trouble, who might actually have the resources to fight them. What exactly is your stake in all this, Mr. Rowe? The mayor asked carefully. I'm a minority partner, 20% of the business in exchange for my labor and expertise. Miss Hartwell retains majority ownership and final say on all decisions. It was a reasonable arrangement, the kind that happened all the time in small businesses. More importantly, it was just plausible enough to give the council pause. We'll need to see documentation, Samuel Gates said. Partnership agreements, financial records, proof of Mr. Rowe's investment. Of course, Caleb said smoothly. We'll have everything drawn up by the end of the week, which gave them time to actually create those documents, to build the framework of their fiction. Eliza's mind was already working through the logistics, figuring out what they'd need, how to make it look legitimate. The council members exchanged glances. They'd been outmaneuvered, and they knew it. Oh, they could still force the issue, could demand immediate proof, could call Caleb's bluff. But that would mean openly admitting they were trying to steal a woman's property, which would look very bad indeed. Finally, Mayor Walsh nodded. Very well. We'll postpone the auction pending review of the partnership documentation. You have 1 week, Miss Hartwell. If everything is in order, the council will reconsider its position. It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve. As they left the hotel, Eliza realized she was shaking. Not from fear, from exhilaration. For the first time since her father died, she felt something other than helpless grief. She felt like she might actually have a chance. "Thank you," she said to Caleb as they stood on the boardwalk. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this." "You already did," Caleb said. "You trusted me. That's payment enough." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the afternoon sun with her crutches and her hope, and the first real smile she'd managed in a week. She didn't notice Thomas Blackwood watching from the hotel window, his expression dark with fury. And she didn't know that in 1 week's time, everything would change again. But for now, in this moment, she was still fighting, and that was enough. The week that followed was the hardest work Eliza had ever done, and she'd spent 9 years learning to do everything twice as hard as anyone else. She and Caleb met every morning before dawn in the store's back room, surrounded by ledgers, receipts, and blank partnership agreements Caleb had purchased from the town clerk. The documents had to look authentic, which meant building a paper trail that stretched back 6 months, falsifying delivery records, creating payment receipts, forging her father's signature on documents that had never existed. Eliza's hands cramped from writing, her conscience from lying. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered Thomas Blackwood's face, the council's casual dismissal of her humanity, and she kept writing. "This one needs to be dated March 15th, Caleb said, studying a supply ledger. "Make it for 200 pounds of grain. I supposedly hauled it from the mill." Eliza dipped her pen in ink. "You know this is fraud. You know what they're doing is theft. Sometimes you fight fire with fire." He glanced at her. "You having second thoughts?" Every minute. She began writing, her penmanship perfect despite her exhaustion. "But I'm doing it anyway." Caleb smiled slightly. "That's courage, Miss Hartwell. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the thing anyway. Where'd you learn that? Some cowboy philosophy?" "The war." His smile faded. "I was 17 when I enlisted. Spent 3 years being scared out of my mind and pretending I wasn't. Lost a lot of friends who couldn't keep pretending." It was the most personal thing he'd shared since they'd met. Eliza looked up from her work, studying his face in the lamplight. He was staring at nothing, lost in memories she couldn't see. "Which side?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter anymore? We all lost." He shook himself like a dog shedding water. "Come on, we've got 20 more documents to forge before sunrise." They worked in silence after that, the scratch of pen on paper the only sound. Outside, Willow Ridge slept, unaware that in the back room of Hartwell's general store, 2 desperate people were building a fortress of lies to protect a simple truth, that a woman's worth shouldn't be measured by the straightness of her spine. By the 4th day, they had everything they needed. Partnership agreement signed and dated. Financial records showing Caleb's investment of $500, money he didn't have but claimed to have earned from cattle drives. Letters of reference from ranchers in Texas who'd never heard of him. It was a masterpiece of deception, thorough enough to withstand casual scrutiny, fragile enough to crumble under serious investigation. "Think it'll work?" Eliza asked as they organized the final stack of papers. Caleb shrugged. "Depends on how hard they look. If they really want to bury you, they'll find holes. But if they're just looking for an excuse to back down without losing face, this gives them one. And if they find the holes, then we're both in trouble. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy to defraud the town council. Could mean jail time." He met her eyes. "I'm willing to take that risk. Question is, are you?" Eliza thought about the institution in Denver, about spending the rest of her life in a room full of people society had discarded, treated like a child, denied agency over her own existence. She thought about her father's blood soaking into the floorboards, about his final words, about the promise she'd made to herself standing over his grave. "Yes," she said, "I'm willing." "Good." Caleb gathered the documents into a leather portfolio. "Then let's go give the council something to chew on." But as they headed for the door, Eliza noticed something she'd missed before. Caleb's gun belt, usually worn loose and easy, was cinched tight. His coat was unbuttoned despite the morning chill, giving him quick access to the weapon on his hip. His eyes kept flicking to the windows, the door, the shadows. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Probably nothing." "You're a terrible liar, Mr. Rowe. What's wrong?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I saw someone yesterday. Man I knew from before. He didn't see me, or at least I don't think he did. But if he's in town, others might be too." "Others who want to hurt you?" "Others who want me dead, more specifically." Caleb's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "I told you I'm a drover." "That's true. But it's not the whole truth. I've got history, Miss Hartwell. Bad history. And history has a way of catching up." Eliza's stomach clenched. "Should I be worried?" "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'm probably being paranoid." But his hand rested on his gun as he scanned the empty street. "Come on, let's get this over with." They walked to the mayor's hotel in silence, Eliza's crutches tapping a steady rhythm on the boardwalk, Caleb's boots silent beside her. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of day that promised warmth later but bit with frost now. A few early risers were out, the baker carrying loaves to his shop, a rancher loading supplies into his wagon. But most of Willow Ridge still slept. The council was waiting in the same back room, the same men in the same chairs, like actors performing the same play. But there was a new tension in the air now, a wariness that hadn't been there before. Mayor Walsh gestured to two empty chairs. "Please, sit." Eliza lowered herself into one, balancing her crutches against the table. Caleb remained standing, the portfolio under his arm. "You have the documents?" Samuel Gates asked. "Everything you requested." Caleb placed the portfolio on the table and opened it, revealing the neat stack of papers inside. Partnership agreements, financial records, letters of reference, proof of investment. It's all there. The banker reached for the documents and began examining them with the meticulous attention of a man who'd spent his life finding errors in other people's paperwork. The minutes stretched. Eliza forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly, to keep her hands still in her lap. Beside her, Caleb was a statue carved from stone. Finally, Gates looked up. "These appear to be in order." Thomas Blackwood snatched the papers from his hands. "Let me see those." He read through everything twice, his scowl deepening with each page. Eliza could see the moment he found something, could see the triumph flash across his face. "This letter of reference," he said, holding up one of the forged documents. "It's from the Double R Ranch in Texas, dated last September. Claims Mr. Rowe worked a cattle drive for them." He looked at Caleb. "The Double R Ranch burned down 2 years ago. Everyone in the cattle business knows that." Eliza's heart stopped, but Caleb didn't even blink. "The ranch burned. The owner, Richard Reynolds, didn't. He's been running cattle out of his brother's place since then. Still uses the Double R brand, still signs his letters the same way. You want to send a telegram to verify. Be my guest. Cost you $2. It was a bluff. It had to be. But Caleb delivered it with such perfect confidence that even Eliza almost believed him. Blackwood's mouth opened, closed. He looked down at the letter again, uncertainty flickering across his features. To send the telegram and have Caleb's story confirmed would make Blackwood look like a fool. But to let it pass without checking. "I'll send the telegram," Blackwood said finally. "In fact, I'll verify all of these references. If there's even one discrepancy, even one hint of fraud, I'll have both of you arrested." "Fair enough," Caleb said. "While you're at it, maybe you should verify your own financial records. I hear there's some question about those mining claims you bought last year." The room went very still. "What are you implying?" Blackwood's voice was dangerously soft. "Not implying anything, just making conversation." Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny how people who live in glass houses are always the first to throw stones." Mayor Walsh cleared his throat loudly. "Gentlemen, please, let's keep this civil." He looked at the documents spread across the table, then at Eliza. "Miss Hartwell, I'll be honest with you. This partnership changes things. If Mr. Rowe is indeed a legitimate business partner with capital investment and operational involvement, the council has no legal grounds to force a sale." "I told you that from the beginning," Eliza said. "Yes, well." The mayor shifted uncomfortably. "We had concerns about your ability to manage alone. But with Mr. Rowe's assistance, those concerns are somewhat alleviated." "Somewhat." Eliza heard the word for what it was: a hedge, an escape clause, a way to keep the door open for future interference. But it was more than she'd had a week ago. "So the auction is canceled?" she asked. "Postponed, pending verification of Mr. Rowe's credentials. If everything checks out, then yes, the auction will be canceled, and you'll be free to continue operating the store." Mayor Walsh paused. "However, the council will be monitoring the situation. If the business fails, if debts go unpaid, if there's any sign of impropriety, we reserve the right to take action." Translation: they'd be watching, waiting for her to fail, ready to pounce the moment she stumbled. "Understood," Eliza said. "Is there anything else?" The council members exchanged glances. Reverend Williams, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. "There is one other matter, Miss Hartwell, with Mr. Rowe living under the same roof." "He doesn't live there," Eliza interrupted. "He has a room at Mrs. Chen's boarding house." This was news to Caleb, judging by the slight twitch of his eyebrow, but he didn't contradict her. "I see," the Reverend said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "Even so, a young unmarried woman and a man working in close proximity, without proper supervision, it raises questions of propriety." Eliza wanted to laugh. They were worried about her virtue? They'd been planning to ship her off to rot in an institution, but now they were concerned about propriety? "Mrs. Henderson from the millinery comes by every afternoon," she lied smoothly. "She and I have tea while we go over the accounts." "Is that sufficient supervision, Reverend?" Williams frowned, but nodded. "I suppose that's acceptable." "Then we're done here." Caleb gathered the documents and returned them to the portfolio. "Unless you gentlemen have any other concerns you'd like to raise?" Silence. "Good day, then." Caleb offered his arm to Eliza. She took it, pulling herself upright and settling her crutches into place. Together, they walked out of the room, down the hotel stairs, and into the morning sunlight. They didn't speak until they were halfway back to the store. Then Caleb said quietly, "That was close. Too close. If you hadn't known about the Double R Ranch—" "I didn't. I gambled." He looked at her. "The ranch burning down is true. I heard about it years ago. But whether Reynolds is still running cattle, whether he signs his letters the same way, whether he'd verify my story if anyone actually asked, all of that was pure guess." Eliza stopped walking. "You mean, if Blackwood sends that telegram, we're finished, which is why we need to make sure he doesn't send it." Caleb's expression was grim. "Or if he does, that he gets the answer we need. How do we do that?" "I have an idea. Not a good one, but it's what we've got." He glanced around, checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. "I need to leave town for a few days. There's a telegraph office in Copper Springs, about 30 miles south. If I ride hard, I can make it there and back in 3 days." "What are you going to do in Copper Springs?" "Send a telegram to myself, from Richard Reynolds, verifying my employment." Caleb's smile was humorless. "Then I'm going to bribe the telegraph operator to remember it if anyone asks." "That's fraud, yes. Add it to the list." He straightened. "Can you hold things down here while I'm gone?" Eliza thought about the store, about the townspeople who'd started trickling back in since word of the partnership spread, about Thomas Blackwood's watchful eyes and the council's barely concealed hostility. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "There's always a choice. You could walk away right now, get on that stage to Denver, let the council win. That's a choice." His voice softened. "But I don't think it's your choice, not anymore." He was right. Somewhere in the past week, Eliza had stopped being the helpless victim of circumstance and become something else. A fighter. A liar. A criminal, technically. But also someone who refused to let the world decide her worth. "Go," she said. "I'll manage. Keep the doors locked at night. Don't let anyone in you don't trust." Caleb hesitated, then pulled his gun from its holster and held it out to her. "Take this." Eliza stared at the weapon. "I don't know how to use it." "Point it at whatever you want dead and pull the trigger. That's the basics." When she didn't take it, he added, "Please, I'll feel better knowing you have it." Reluctantly, Eliza accepted the gun. It was heavier than she'd expected, cold and solid in her hand. The weight of it made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "I'll be back in 3 days," Caleb said. 4 at the most. If I'm not back by then, don't say that. If I'm not back, go to the sheriff. Tell him everything. The forgeries, the fraud, all of it. Better to face charges than to face what might be coming if things go wrong. What might be coming? Eliza gripped his arm. Caleb, what aren't you telling me? Nothing you need to worry about yet. He gently removed her hand from his sleeve. Just be careful. Trust your instincts. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, get somewhere safe. Before she could ask more questions, he was gone, striding toward the livery stable where he'd boarded his horse. Eliza watched him go, the gun heavy in her hand, and felt the first real stirrings of fear. What had she gotten herself into? The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended tension. Eliza opened the store each morning and closed it each evening, serving customers who pretended not to stare at her, who whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. She kept the ledgers, organized inventory, and tried not to think about Caleb riding hard toward Copper Springs on an errand of fraud and deception. Mrs. Henderson did not, in fact, come by for tea, but Mrs. Chen from the boarding house did, bringing soup and bread and curious questions about Mr. Rowe. He's a good man, the elderly Chinese woman said, settling into the chair across from Eliza's desk. Quiet, pays his rent on time, but troubled, yes? I see it in his eyes. We're all troubled, Mrs. Chen. Some more than others. The old woman's gaze was sharp despite her age. You be careful with that one, Miss Eliza. He has the look of a man running from something. Or toward something, Eliza murmured. Same thing, sometimes. Mrs. Chen patted her hand. But he stood up for you. That counts for much. Just keep your eyes open. That night, Eliza locked the store's doors and windows, checked them twice, then carried Caleb's gun upstairs to her room. She set it on the nightstand within easy reach and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and groan of the old building. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by dreams of her father's blood and shadowy figures at the window. On the morning of the 3rd day, Thomas Blackwood came calling. Eliza was opening the store, struggling with the heavy shutters that covered the windows, when his carriage pulled up outside. He climbed down, impeccably dressed as always, and crossed the boardwalk with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. Miss Hartwell. Working alone, I see. Mr. Rowe is away on business. Eliza kept her voice level. Was there something you needed? Just checking on your operation, making sure everything is running smoothly. His smile was cold. Where's your partner exactly? Copper Springs, meeting with suppliers. Copper Springs. Blackwood savored the words. Interesting. I sent telegrams yesterday to all the references in Mr. Rowe's documentation. Haven't heard back yet, but I expect to soon. Eliza's blood ran cold, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm sure you will. Mr. Rowe's credentials are impeccable. We'll see. He stepped closer, invading her space in a way that made her skin crawl. You know, Miss Hartwell, this would all be much easier if you just accepted reality. You can't win. Sooner or later, your little charade will fall apart, and when it does, you'll face consequences far worse than a trip to Denver. Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackwood? I'm warning you. There's a difference. He glanced around the store, his expression calculating. This building, this inventory, it's worth quite a bit. I'm prepared to make you a fair offer. Sell to me now, walk away with enough money to start fresh somewhere else, and I'll forget about the fraud you and your partner are clearly committing. The answer is no. You're making a mistake. That's my right. Now please leave. I have work to do. Blackwood's jaw tightened. For a moment, Eliza thought he might actually lose his temper, might drop the pretense of civility and show her who he really was, but then he smiled again, that cold, calculated smile. Very well, but don't say I didn't give you a chance. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day, Miss Hartwell. I'll be in touch when the telegrams arrive. He left, and Eliza stood in the doorway watching his carriage disappear down the street. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the doorframe and concentrated on breathing. Caleb had been gone 3 days. If he didn't return soon with his forged telegram, if Blackwood's inquiries reached Texas before Caleb's bribed telegraph operator could intercept them, it was over. She'd be arrested, charged with fraud, possibly imprisoned. And even if she somehow avoided jail, the store would be taken, her father's legacy destroyed, and she'd end up exactly where the council wanted her, powerless and invisible. "Please," she whispered to the empty street, "please come back." But the street offered no answers. That evening, as Eliza was closing the store, she heard hoofbeats. Fast, urgent, the sound of a horse being ridden hard. She grabbed Caleb's gun from where she'd hidden it under the counter and moved to the window. A rider was coming up the street, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, Eliza's heart leapt. It was Caleb, his horse lathered and blowing, dust coating his clothes and face. He dismounted before the animal had fully stopped and burst through the door. "Did Blackwood send those telegrams?" "Yesterday. He came by this morning to gloat about it." "Damn." Caleb pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "I got to Copper Springs, sent the telegram from Reynolds, bribed the operator. But it takes time for messages to reach Texas and get responses. If Blackwood's telegrams beat mine—" "We're finished," Eliza said. "I know." They stared at each other, both exhausted, both terrified, both too stubborn to quit. "There's something else," Caleb said quietly. "While I was in Copper Springs, I heard things. Men asking about me. About a drover named Rowe who might be in the area." His hand drifted to where his gun should have been, then remembered he'd given it to Eliza. "They're getting close. The men from my past. If they find me here, they'll hurt anyone near you," Eliza finished. "I understand." "No, you don't." He moved closer, his voice urgent. "These aren't outlaws looking for a payday. They're killers, Eliza. Men I rode with, men I betrayed. They want me dead, and they won't care who gets caught in the crossfire." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The intimacy of it, here in the failing light with danger closing in from all sides, made her throat tight. "Then leave," she said. "Go now before they find you. I'll handle things here. You'll be arrested the moment those telegrams come back wrong. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe I can convince them it was all you're doing, that you conned me." She smiled without humor. "It's not that far from the truth. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. You don't have a choice. Your past is catching up. You said so yourself. Better you disappear before it gets here." Eliza held out his gun. "Take it. You'll need it more than I will." Caleb didn't move. "If I leave, Blackwood wins. The council wins. They take everything. If you stay, you die, and probably get me killed too." She thrust the gun toward him again. "Please, I've already lost my father. I can't watch someone else die because of me." "This isn't because of you, isn't it? If you hadn't stopped to help a crippled girl, you'd be long gone by now, safe." "I'd be alone," Caleb said quietly. "I've been alone for 5 years, Eliza. Running, hiding, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. You gave me something I forgot I could have, a purpose, a reason to stand still." Tears burned in Eliza's eyes. "Don't say things like that." "Why not? It's the truth." He reached out and gently took the gun from her hand, but instead of holstering it, he set it on the counter between them. "I'm not leaving. We started this together. We'll finish it together, whatever comes." "That's insane." "Probably." His smile was crooked, tired, real. "But I've done a lot of insane things in my life. This is the first one that feels right." Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky blood red. In the gathering darkness, Eliza and Caleb stood on opposite sides of the counter, two people bound together by lies and desperation and something else, something fragile and new and terrifying. "All right," Eliza whispered. "Together. Together." Neither of them saw the figure watching from across the street, a man with hard eyes and a scarred face, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Neither of them knew that the next morning would bring more than just Blackwood's telegrams. It would bring reckoning. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And in a world that had taken so much, that was almost enough to feel like hope. The man with the scarred face walked into Hartwell's general store at 10 o'clock the next morning, just as Eliza was helping Mrs. Patterson select fabric for a new dress. He didn't announce himself, didn't make a sound, but Eliza felt his presence the way you feel a storm building on the horizon. She looked up from the bolt of calico and went very still. He was tall and rangy, somewhere in his 40s, with a face that looked like it had been put through a meat grinder and reassembled wrong. A thick scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw, pulling his mouth into a permanent sneer. His clothes were trail-worn, but his boots were expensive, and the gun on his hip had the oiled shine of a tool used often and maintained well. "Help you?" Eliza kept her voice steady, though her heart was hammering. The man's eyes swept over her, lingering on her crutches with neither pity nor disgust, just cold assessment. Then he smiled, and it was worse than if he'd scowled. "Looking for someone. Man named Caleb Rowe. Heard he might be around these parts." Mrs. Patterson made a small, frightened sound and clutched her fabric closer. The scarred man glanced at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her drop the calico and hurry out of the store without another word. "Don't know anyone by that name," Eliza lied. "That's so." The man moved deeper into the store, his movements casual but purposeful, like a wolf circling prey. "Funny, telegraph operator in Copper Springs said a man matching Caleb's description came through 3 days ago. Paid good money to send a telegram and keep quiet about it. Only problem is Jake, that's the operator, he talks when he drinks, and I bought him a lot of drinks." Eliza's blood turned to ice. If this man knew about Copper Springs, knew about the telegram, then he knew everything. Their careful fraud, their desperate gamble, all of it was about to come crashing down. "I run a store," she said carefully. "Lots of people come through, can't remember everyone." "You'd remember Caleb. He's memorable." The scarred man picked up a can of peaches, examined it, set it back. "Used to ride with my crew 5 years back. Good with a gun, better with horses. Smart enough to know when to keep his head down." The smile faded. "Until he wasn't." "I'm sorry, but I really can't help you." "See, I think you can." He moved to the counter, placed both hands flat on the surface, leaned forward. "I think Caleb's been here. I think maybe he's still here, and I think you know exactly where to find him." "You need to leave." Eliza reached under the counter where she'd hidden Caleb's gun that morning, her fingers closing around the grip. "Now." The scarred man saw the movement and laughed. "You gonna shoot me, girl? With those shaky hands and them crippled legs? You ever even fired a gun before?" "Get out of my store." "Or what? You'll shoot me in front of half the town?" He gestured to the window where faces were already gathering, drawn by the confrontation. "Go ahead, pull that trigger, see what happens." Eliza's finger trembled on the trigger guard. He was right. She'd never fired a gun in her life. And even if she could bring herself to shoot, even if her hand stayed steady enough to aim, killing a man in her store would destroy everything she'd fought for. The back door opened. Caleb walked in, his own gun already drawn, his face absolutely expressionless. "Hello, Dutch." The scarred man straightened slowly, his hands moving away from the counter. "Caleb, been a long time." "Not long enough." "Now that hurts my feelings." Dutch's grin was sharp as broken glass. "After all we've been through together, all them jobs we pulled, all them miles we rode, that's how you greet an old friend?" "We're not friends. We never were." Caleb moved to stand between Dutch and Eliza, his gun steady. "How'd you find me?" "Same way I always find people. Asked questions, followed leads, paid the right folks." Dutch's eyes flicked to Eliza. "Heard you got yourself a partner now. Business partner. That true?" "None of your concern." "Oh, but it is. See, you owe me, Caleb. You owe all of us, and we've come to collect." "I don't owe you anything. You rode away with our money, $20,000 from that bank job in Amarillo. That makes you a thief." Dutch's voice went hard. "We don't take kindly to thieves." Eliza's mind reeled. $20,000. A bank robbery. Caleb hadn't just been an outlaw. He'd been part of a gang, and he'd stolen from them. The man she'd trusted, the man she'd built a partnership with, was a criminal and a traitor. "I didn't take your money," Caleb said. "I left before that job. You know that." "You left the night before." "Convenient timing, don't you think? Next morning, the bank vault's empty, and so are you. What am I supposed to think?" "Think what you want. I'm not the one who robbed that bank." "Then where were you? Where'd you go?" Dutch took a step forward. Caleb's gun rose slightly in warning, and Dutch stopped. You disappeared, fell off the face of the earth. Man does that, it's because he's got something to hide. I left because I was done. Done with the killing, done with the running, done with men like you. Caleb's voice was quiet, but absolute. I walked away to save whatever was left of my soul, and I didn't take a damn thing that wasn't mine. Prove it. I don't have to prove anything to you. They stared at each other, two men with guns and history and hatred between them. The store was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall and Eliza's ragged breathing. Finally, Dutch smiled again. Well, guess we're at an impasse then. You say you didn't take the money, I say you did. Only one way to settle it that I can see.
You want to draw on me, Dutch, right here, right now. Caleb's voice was calm, almost bored. I'm faster than I used to be, and you were never that fast to begin with. Maybe not, but I didn't come alone. Dutch glanced toward the window. Got 3 boys waiting outside. You might take me, Caleb. Might even take 2 of them, but you won't take all 4. And when you're dead, well, his eyes slid to Eliza. Hate for innocent folks to get caught in the crossfire. It was a threat, clear and simple. Surrender or watch everyone around you die. Leave her out of this, Caleb said. Can't do that. She's involved now. You made her involved the minute you walked into her life. Dutch spread his hands in mock apology. But I'm a reasonable man. Come with us, peaceful-like. We'll ride out of town, have ourselves a conversation about that missing money. If you can convince me you didn't take it, maybe we let you go. Maybe. And if I can't convince you, then you die slow instead of fast. Your choice. Eliza found her voice, though it came out hoarse. Don't go with him, Caleb. He's lying. He'll kill you either way. Smart girl, Dutch said approvingly. Pretty, too. Even with them bad legs. Shame about the accident. What happened? Fall off a horse? Don't talk to her. Caleb's gun hand tightened. Don't even look at her. Touchy, touchy, Dutch tisked. You gone soft on me, Caleb? Catching feelings for the cripple girl? That ain't like you. You used to be ice cold, all business. Now look at you playing house and pretending to be respectable. Last warning, Dutch. Leave. Now. Or you'll what? Shoot me in front of all these witnesses? Dutch gestured to the window again, where the crowd had grown. Eliza could see faces she recognized. Mrs. Chen, the baker, Sheriff Briggs pushing his way through. Go ahead. Pull that trigger. Give these good people something to talk about at Sunday supper. The door opened and Sheriff Briggs stepped in, his hand on his own gun. What's going on here? Just a misunderstanding, Sheriff, Dutch said smoothly. Me and Caleb here, we're old friends catching up. Ain't that right, Caleb? Caleb didn't answer. His eyes never left Dutch. Briggs looked between them, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. That true, Mr. Rowe? This man a friend of yours? It was a test. Caleb could confirm Dutch's story, smooth everything over, buy time. Or he could tell the truth and watch the situation explode. No, Caleb said. We're not friends. This man is threatening Miss Hartwell. I'm asking him to leave. Dutch's smile disappeared. That's a lie, Sheriff. I came in here looking to buy supplies, and this man pulled a gun on me for no reason. That's assault, maybe attempted murder. Is that true, Miss Hartwell? Briggs asked. Eliza's mind raced. If she backed Caleb's story, she'd be accusing Dutch of threatening her, which would require an investigation, statements, possibly a trial. But if she backed Dutch's version, Caleb would be arrested, and Dutch would be free to, what? Kill him in his cell? Or wait until he was released and finish the job then? He's lying, she said, her voice stronger now. This man came in here asking about Caleb. When I said I didn't know anything, he threatened me. That's when Caleb came in. Threatening a lady? Briggs's hand tightened on his gun. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. It's also a serious lie, Dutch said. Check my gun, Sheriff. Still holstered. Haven't drawn it once. How's that a threat? You don't need a gun to threaten someone, Eliza shot back. You implied that if I didn't tell you where to find Caleb, something bad would happen. That's a threat. Briggs looked torn. He was a decent man, but not a clever one.
better suited to breaking up bar fights than navigating the subtleties of he said, she said accusations. Look, he said finally, I don't know what's going on between you folks, but I can't have armed men pointing guns at each other in the middle of town. Mr. Rowe, lower your weapon. Not until he leaves, Caleb said. Mr. Rowe, he's got 3 men waiting outside, Sheriff. They're part of his gang. They came here to kill me, and they won't care who gets hurt in the process. Caleb's voice was tight. So I'm not lowering anything until he's gone. Gang? Briggs's eyebrows shot up. What gang? There's no gang, Dutch said. I got some friends traveling with me, sure. But we're honest drovers, looking for work. This man's paranoid, Sheriff. Probably got a guilty conscience about something. That true, Rowe? You got something to feel guilty about? The question hung in the air. Eliza could see the calculation in Caleb's eyes, could see him weighing truth against safety, honesty against survival. Everyone's got something, Caleb said finally, but that's not what this is about. This man wants me dead. That's all you need to know. I need a lot more than that if you're asking me to run someone out of town. Briggs moved between them, his bulk imposing, if not threatening. Both of you, put the guns away, now. We're going to walk over to my office, have a civilized conversation, and sort this out. Can't do that, Sheriff, Caleb said. That's not a request. I leave this store, I'm dead. So's Miss Hartwell, probably. So's anyone else who gets in the way. Caleb's jaw was set. I'm staying right here until Dutch and his boys ride out of town. Dutch laughed. You hear this, Sheriff? Man's holding you hostage in a general store over some imaginary threat. That's insane behavior. Dangerous behavior. You gonna let him get away with it? Briggs's face was turning red. He was a man who valued order, who believed in rules and procedures, and this situation was rapidly spinning beyond his control. Mr. Rowe, I'm giving you to the count of 3 to lower that weapon. If you don't, I'll have to arrest you for refusing a lawful order. 1. Sheriff, please, Eliza said desperately. This man is lying. He's... 2. Caleb looked at her, and in his eyes, Eliza saw apology, resignation, and something that looked like goodbye. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for getting you mixed up in all this. You deserved better. Don't, Eliza whispered. Don't you dare give up. 3. Caleb lowered his gun. Dutch moved like a striking snake. His hand flashed to his holster, drawing his weapon in one smooth motion, and fired. The bullet caught Caleb in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He crashed into a shelf, scattering cans and supplies across the floor. His gun flew from his hand and skittered across the boards. No! Eliza lurched forward, her crutch catching on the corner of the counter. She fell hard, pain shooting through her already damaged legs. Sheriff Briggs drew his own weapon, but Dutch was faster. His second shot took the sheriff in the chest, and the big man went down like a felled tree, blood spreading across his shirt. Damn fool, Dutch muttered, already holstering his gun. Told him to mind his business. Outside, people were screaming, running. The 3 men Dutch had mentioned appeared in the doorway, all armed, all grinning. Caleb was trying to get up, his good hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. Dutch walked over and kicked him in the ribs hard enough to crack bone. Caleb collapsed with a grunt of pain. Thought you were faster than me? Dutch crouched beside him. Maybe you were once. But you went soft, Caleb. Caring about people makes you weak, makes you hesitate. He glanced at Eliza. Like hesitating to shoot me because you were worried about your little crippled girlfriend seeing who you really are. Leave her alone, Caleb gasped. Or what? You gonna stop me? Dutch grabbed Caleb's shirt and hauled him halfway up. Where's my money? Don't have it. Never did. Dutch hit him across the face with the butt of his gun. Blood exploded from Caleb's nose. Wrong answer. Try again. I don't know where it is. Someone else took it. Someone from the gang. Everyone from the gang's accounted for, except you. Another hit, this one opening a gash above Caleb's eye. Last chance, old friend. Where's the money? Caleb spit blood. Go to hell. You first. Dutch raised his gun to Caleb's head, and Eliza screamed. She'd managed to pull herself halfway upright using the counter, and her hand closed around something cold and metal. Caleb's gun. The one he'd dropped when he was shot. She didn't think. Didn't hesitate.
didn't let herself feel the weight of what she was about to do. She pointed the gun at Dutch and pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wild, slamming into the wall 3 feet to Dutch's left. But it was enough. Dutch jerked back, his own shot going high, punching a hole in the ceiling instead of Caleb's skull. "The hell?" Dutch spun toward her, his face twisted with fury. One of the other men grabbed his arm. "Dutch, we gotta go. People heard those shots. Law's gonna be here any minute." "I'm not done with him." "You wanna hang? Move." Dutch looked between Caleb and Eliza, calculation warring with rage. Then he kicked Caleb one more time for good measure and backed toward the door. "This ain't over. You hear me, Caleb? This ain't even close to over. We'll find you again. And next time, your girl won't be there to save you." Then they were gone, the sound of their boots on the boardwalk receding, followed by the thunder of hooves as they rode hard out of town. Eliza dropped the gun and crawled to Caleb's side. "Don't you die! You hear me? Don't you dare die!" He coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "Wasn't planning on it." "You were shot. You need a doctor." "So does the sheriff." Caleb tried to sit up, failed, fell back with a groan. "Is he alive?" Eliza crawled to where Sheriff Briggs lay in a spreading pool of blood. She pressed her fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, thready and weak, but there. "He's alive. Barely. Get help. Get Doc Morrison. I'm not leaving you." "Eliza." His voice was weak but firm. "Go." She wanted to argue, wanted to stay, wanted to somehow reverse the last 5 minutes and make everything different. But Caleb was right. If the sheriff died, if they didn't get help immediately, more blood would be on their hands than just what already soaked the floorboards. Using her crutches, Eliza pulled herself upright and hobbled to the door. Outside, the street was chaos. People running, shouting, pointing. She grabbed the nearest person, young Billy Fletcher from the livery stable. "Get Doc Morrison, now. The sheriff's been shot." Billy went white. "Shot? Who?" "Move." He ran. Eliza turned back to the store. Through the window, she could see Caleb lying on the floor, one hand pressed to his shoulder, his face pale as death. She could see Sheriff Briggs's boots, motionless. She could see the destruction, the blood, the evidence of violence that would change everything. Her partnership with Caleb had been built on lies. But in the chaos of the last hour, one truth had crystallized with perfect clarity. She cared about him. More than was wise, more than was safe. And whether he was a thief or a killer, or exactly who he claimed to be, didn't matter as much as the simple fact that he'd stood between her and danger without hesitation. Thomas Blackwood appeared at her elbow. "What happened here?" "Men came looking for Caleb. They shot the sheriff." "And Mr. Rowe?" "He tried to protect me. Protect all of us." She looked at Blackwood. "You wanted proof he was legitimate? There's your proof. A con man wouldn't take a bullet for a crippled girl in a store that's barely profitable." Blackwood's expression was unreadable. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just trying to save his own skin by playing the hero. Think what you want. But if you're sending your telegrams about his credentials, you might want to include the fact that he nearly died defending this town's sheriff." Doc Morrison arrived then, his bag in hand, his face grim. He pushed past them into the store and went immediately to the sheriff, barking orders at the men who'd followed him. "Get me water! Get me bandages! Get me whiskey, and lots of it!" Eliza stood in the doorway watching as Morrison worked, as Caleb was lifted onto a makeshift stretcher and carried out, as the sheriff's massive body was heaved onto another. Both men were alive, but for how long? "Miss Hartwell," Blackwood's voice was quiet. "Those telegrams I sent? The responses came back this morning. Before all this." Her heart stopped. "And?" "Richard Reynolds confirms Caleb Rowe worked for him. So do the other references. Every single one checked out." Blackwood paused. "Which means either your partner is legitimate or he's the most thorough liar I've ever encountered." Eliza said nothing. What could she say? That Caleb was both? That the truth and the lies were so tangled together she couldn't separate them anymore? "The council will meet tomorrow," Blackwood continued. "We'll discuss the matter of the store, the partnership, and what happened here today. Until then, I suggest you get some rest. You look like death warmed over." He walked away, leaving Eliza alone in the doorway of her blood-soaked store. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of Willow Ridge trying to make sense of the violence that had shattered its afternoon. But here, in this moment, there was only silence and the slow drip of blood seeping through the floorboards. Eliza lowered herself to sit on the threshold, her crutches beside her, and put her head in her hands. She didn't cry. Couldn't cry. There was a numbness spreading through her, a cold realization that everything had changed and nothing would ever be the same. Caleb had a past, a dark one, full of violence and theft and men who wanted him dead. And whether he was guilty of what they accused him of or not, that past had followed him here, had put her in danger, had nearly killed them both. The smart thing would be to cut ties.
Tell the council the partnership was dissolved. Let Caleb face whatever consequences came from his choices while she salvaged what she could of her own life. But Eliza had never been smart about the things that mattered. She pulled herself upright and limped back into the store. There was blood to clean, a store to salvage. And tomorrow, decisions to make that would determine not just her future, but Caleb's as well. The woman who'd been pitied, dismissed, and deemed worthless by her town had just shot at a man to save another. And somewhere in the violence and chaos, she'd found something she'd lost the day her father died. The will to fight for what was hers, consequences be damned. Eliza spent that night scrubbing blood from the floorboards. She worked by lamplight, her crutches propped against the counter, her damaged legs folded beneath her as she knelt in the spreading stains. The water in her bucket turned pink, then red, then a deep rust color that made her stomach turn. But she kept scrubbing, kept working, because if she stopped, she'd have to think about what had happened, about the gun in her hand and the recoil up her arm and how close she'd come to killing a man. Mrs. Chen found her there at midnight, still scrubbing at stains that would never fully come out. "Miss Eliza." The old woman's voice was gentle. "Come. This can wait until morning." "It can't. The council meets tomorrow. They can't see it like this." Eliza's voice was mechanical, empty. "They'll say I can't run the store, that it's too dangerous, that I need protection." "You do need protection. We all need protection from men like that." Mrs. Chen knelt beside her with a grace that belied her age. She took the brush from Eliza's raw, bleeding hands. "But you won't get it by destroying yourself. Come. I have soup. You will eat, then sleep. I need to finish. You need to rest. Your body has limits, even if your will does not." The old woman's eyes were kind but firm. "The store will still be here tomorrow. The blood will still be here. But if you collapse from exhaustion, who will fight for what you've built?" Eliza looked down at her hands. They were shaking, had been shaking for hours, and she hadn't even noticed. Her legs ached with a deep, grinding pain that meant she'd pushed too hard, done too much. Mrs. Chen was right. She was destroying herself. "How is he?" Eliza asked quietly. "Caleb, how is he?" "Alive. Doc Morrison removed the bullet from his shoulder. Says he'll heal, though the ribs will take time." Mrs. Chen helped Eliza to her feet, steadying her as she found her crutches. "He's been asking for you." "I can't see him. Not yet." "Why not?" Because if she saw him, she'd have to confront the truth, have to face what she'd learned about his past, about the men hunting him, about the violence that followed in his wake. Have to decide whether the man who'd stood up for her was worth the danger he brought. "I don't know what to say to him," Eliza admitted. "Then say nothing. Just sit. Sometimes presence is enough." Mrs. Chen guided her toward the door. "Come, soup first, then we decide what comes next." They walked through the dark streets to the boarding house, Mrs. Chen supporting Eliza when her legs threatened to give out. The town was quiet, windows dark, everyone locked safely inside. Word had spread fast about the shooting, about the gang that had ridden into Willow Ridge in broad daylight and shot the sheriff in cold blood. People were scared. They should be, Eliza thought, because Dutch and his men would come back. Caleb had known it, had tried to warn them, but no one had listened. And now Sheriff Briggs was fighting for his life while his deputy organized a posse that wouldn't know what to do when they actually found the men they were hunting. At the boarding house, Mrs. Chen led Eliza to the kitchen and sat her at the scarred wooden table. The soup was simple: broth and vegetables and strips of pork, but it was hot and filling. Eliza ate mechanically, not tasting, just consuming fuel her body needed. "The council will blame him," Eliza said finally. "They'll say Caleb brought this violence to town, that he's dangerous." "Are they wrong?" The question hit harder than Eliza expected. "I don't know. He says he didn't steal the money they're accusing him of. Says he left the gang before that robbery, but Dutch seemed pretty convinced." Men like Dutch are always convinced of something, usually whatever serves them best. Mrs. Chen refilled Eliza's bowl. "The question is not whether Caleb has a past. Everyone has a past. The question is whether you believe he is trying to build a different future. Does it matter what I believe? If those men come back, then we fight, or we run. But we do not give up what is ours because evil men make demands." The old woman's eyes were fierce. "I came to this country with nothing, Miss Eliza. Nothing but my husband and my daughter and the clothes on our backs. Men told us we were not welcome, told us to go back where we came from. But we stayed. We built. And when men came with threats and torches, we fought." "What happened?" "We lost the laundry, lost our home. My husband," Mrs. Chen's voice went soft, "he did not survive, but my daughter did. And she built a new life, a better life, because we did not let evil men decide our worth." Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know, but the fight is not over. Tomorrow the council meets. They will ask you questions. They will demand answers. What will you tell them?" "The truth, I suppose. That Caleb has a past, that men are hunting him, that he tried to protect the sheriff and nearly died for it." "And about the partnership, the documents?" Eliza hesitated. The forged papers, the fabricated history, the elaborate lie they'd constructed, all of it could crumble tomorrow under scrutiny. Blackwood's telegrams had verified the references, but that was because Caleb had bribed the telegraph operator in Copper Springs. If the council dug deeper, if they sent investigators to Texas, the whole scheme would collapse. "I'll tell them the partnership is real," Eliza said, "that Caleb invested money and labor into the store, that we're business partners committed to making it succeed, even if it means lying." Even then, Eliza met Mrs. Chen's eyes. "Because the alternative is losing everything my father built, and I won't let that happen." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Then you must prepare. The council will try to break you. Blackwood especially. He wants that store, and he will use today's violence as proof you cannot manage it." "What do I do?" "You remind them that violence came to the sheriff's office too, that it came to decent men doing their jobs, that nowhere is safe when evil decides to visit." The old woman stood, began clearing the bowls. "And you remind them that you did not run. You did not hide. You picked up a gun and fought back." Eliza thought about that moment. Dutch's weapon pointed at Caleb's head, her hand closing around the gun. The impossible weight of it, the decision made in a fraction of a second. She'd missed, fired wild, but she'd tried. And in trying, she'd saved Caleb's life. "I was terrified," she whispered. "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it." Mrs. Chen paused at the doorway. "Mr. Rowe is upstairs, third door on the left, if you wish to see him." Then she was gone, leaving Eliza alone in the kitchen with her thoughts and her fear and her bone-deep exhaustion. She should go upstairs to the room Mrs. Chen had prepared for her. Should sleep, rest, prepare for tomorrow's battle. But instead she found herself climbing the stairs, her crutches silent on the worn carpet, her heart hammering as she approached the third door on the left. It was slightly ajar. Through the gap she could see lamplight and the edge of a bed. She pushed it open. Caleb lay propped against pillows, his shoulder wrapped in white bandages already seeping red. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, his lip split. But he was awake, and when he saw her, something like relief crossed his battered features. "Eliza, I shouldn't be here." But she came in anyway, closing the door behind her. "It's not proper." "Since when do you care about proper?" Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Fair point." She moved to the chair beside his bed and lowered herself into it, grateful to be off her aching legs. "How do you feel?" like I got shot and beaten and kicked in the ribs. He shifted, winced. Doc says I'll live. Sheriff too, probably, though it's touch and go. Because of you, because you tried to protect him. Fat lot of good it did. I should have shot Dutch the second he walked through that door. Should have known he wouldn't leave peaceful. Caleb's good hand clenched into a fist. I hesitated. And Briggs paid for it. You hesitated because there were witnesses, because you were trying to do things the right way. Eliza leaned forward. Dutch was right about one thing. You have gone soft. The old you, the outlaw you, probably would have shot first. But you're not that man anymore. Aren't I? I brought those men here. My past, my mistakes. Sheriff Briggs got shot because of me. You almost got killed because of me. How is that different from who I was? Because you didn't want any of this to happen. Because you tried to protect people instead of hurt them. She paused. Did you steal that money? The $20,000 from Amarillo? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. No, I left the gang 3 days before that job. Rode out in the middle of the night because I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't keep robbing and killing and pretending it didn't matter. What changed? We hit a bank in Silver City. Small place, barely worth the effort. There was a woman working there, a teller. She had a little girl with her, maybe 5 years old. The girl started crying when we came in with guns. His voice went distant. Dutch told her to shut the kid up. When she couldn't, when the girl kept screaming, he aimed his gun at the child, said he'd give her something to really cry about. Eliza's breath caught. I stopped him. Put myself between him and that little girl and told him if he pulled that trigger, I'd kill him myself. Caleb's eyes were haunted. We left without firing a shot. But that night, lying in camp, all I could think about was that child's face. How scared she was. How close I'd come to being part of something unforgivable. So you left. So I left. Took my horse, my gun, and nothing else. Rode north and didn't look back. He looked at her. 3 days later, the gang hit that bank in Amarillo. Got away with $20,000. And when Dutch couldn't find the money, when it vanished along with whoever actually stole it, he decided it was me. Decided I'd played them all, taken their score, and run. But you didn't. But I didn't. Though I don't blame him for thinking it. The timing was too perfect. I disappear, the money disappears. What else would he think? Eliza processed this. So someone else in the gang stole it. Someone who's still out there. Maybe. Or maybe Dutch lost it gambling and made up the whole story to cover his losses. Or maybe it never existed at all, and this is just an excuse to hunt me down for leaving. Caleb's smile was bitter. Doesn't really matter, does it? Either way, they want me dead. Then we run. We leave town tonight, go somewhere they can't find us. We? He studied her face. Eliza, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because if I stay here without you, the council will take the store anyway. They'll say the partnership was fraudulent, that you were a criminal who conned me. Everything we built will collapse. She gripped the arms of the chair. But more than that, I don't want to stay. Not anymore. This town has made it clear what they think of me. The only person who ever treated me like I was worth something was my father. And you. I lied to you, forged documents, put you in danger. You stood up for me when no one else would. You saw me as a person instead of a burden. You nearly died protecting me. Her voice cracked. So yes, we. Because I choose you, Caleb Rowe, past and all. He reached out with his good hand and she took it. His fingers were warm, calloused, strong, despite the pain he must be feeling. They sat like that in the lamplight, two broken people choosing each other over safety. The council meets tomorrow, Caleb said finally. They'll want answers about what happened, about who I really am. Let me handle the council. Eliza, I mean it. You're in no shape to face them. I'll go, I'll answer their questions, and I'll buy us time to figure out our next move. She squeezed his hand. Trust me. I do. That's what scares me. But he squeezed back. All right. You handle the council, but promise me something. What? If things go bad, if Dutch comes back or the council decides to arrest us,
or anything goes wrong, you run. You take whatever money we've got and you get on the first stage out of here.
Don't wait for me. Don't try to help. Just go. I won't. Promise me, Eliza. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd never abandon him, but the look in his eyes was so desperate, so fierce, that she found herself nodding. I promise. It was a lie, and they both knew it, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. Eliza stayed with him until he fell asleep, his hand still holding hers, his breathing evening out despite the pain. Then she carefully extracted herself and limped back to her own room, where she lay awake until dawn, planning. The council met at 9 o'clock in the mayor's hotel. Eliza arrived early, dressed in her best dress, her hair pinned up, her expression composed. She'd barely slept, but she'd learned long ago how to hide exhaustion behind a mask of calm. Thomas Blackwood was already there, along with Mayor Walsh, Samuel Gates the banker, and Reverend Williams. The only one missing was Sheriff Briggs, who was still unconscious in Doc Morrison's surgery. Miss Hartwell. Mayor Walsh gestured to the empty chair across from them. Please sit. She sat, arranging her crutches carefully beside her, folding her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl called before the headmaster. I assume you know why we've called this meeting, Walsh continued. I imagine it has to do with yesterday's events. Events? Blackwood's laugh was harsh. You mean the shootout that left our sheriff dying and turned your store into a battlefield? I mean the attack by a gang of criminals who rode into town looking for my business partner. Eliza kept her voice level. An attack that Mr. Rowe tried to prevent, at great personal risk. Your business partner, Gates said, examining the papers in front of him, who turns out to have a rather colorful past. We've received some interesting information about Mr. Caleb Rowe. Eliza's stomach clenched. What kind of information? The kind that comes from sending inquiries to law enforcement agencies in Texas and New Mexico. Blackwood leaned forward. Your partner, Miss Hartwell, is wanted in connection with multiple bank robberies, including one in Amarillo that netted the thieves $20,000. Wanted for questioning, not wanted for arrest, Eliza corrected, though her heart was pounding. There's a difference. Is there? The man who attacked your store yesterday, this Dutch character, he seemed pretty convinced Rowe was involved. Dutch is a known outlaw with a grudge. His conviction means nothing. Perhaps not. But it raises questions about your judgment, Miss Hartwell, about your ability to run a business when you can't even tell a criminal from an honest man. Blackwood's smile was cruel. One might argue that a woman in your condition is particularly vulnerable to manipulation by unscrupulous characters. There it was. The same argument dressed in new clothes. She wasn't capable because she was a woman. She wasn't capable because she was crippled. She wasn't capable because she'd trusted the wrong man. Mr. Rowe's credentials all checked out, Eliza said. His references verified. You confirmed that yourself, Mr. Blackwood. Yes, and now we're questioning how he managed to fabricate such convincing documentation. Telegraph operators can be bribed. Records can be forged. It wouldn't be the first time a con man built a false identity. If Mr. Rowe is such a skilled con man, why would he stay here? Why would he risk his life to protect the sheriff? Why would he take a bullet defending me and this town? Eliza looked at each council member in turn. Con men run when trouble comes. Caleb stayed and fought. Or he had nowhere else to run, Gates suggested. Perhaps he knew Dutch was closing in and decided his best chance of survival was to ingratiate himself with local authorities. Make himself look like a hero so we'd protect him. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Caleb Rowe used you, Miss Hartwell. Used your vulnerability, your desperate situation, to build himself a hiding place. And now that his past has caught up with him, we're all in danger. Reverend Williams cleared his throat. There's also the matter of propriety. A young unmarried woman and a man with questionable morals working in close quarters, spending time alone together. Yesterday, Mrs. Chen confirmed that you visited Mr. Rowe's room late at night, unchaperoned. Eliza felt her face flush. I was checking on his condition after he'd been shot. In his bedroom, at midnight. You see how that looks? I see that you're more concerned with the appearance of impropriety than with actual crimes like shooting a sheriff in cold blood. Eliza's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. Dutch and his gang are out there somewhere, planning who knows what, and you're worried about whether I had a chaperone when I visited an injured man's sick room. We're worried about your reputation, Williams said primly, and the town's reputation by extension. This incident has drawn attention. People are talking. They're saying Willow Ridge is harboring criminals, that we're not safe. If word spreads that our general store is run by a fallen woman and her outlaw lover, we are not lovers. The words came out sharper than Eliza intended. We are business partners. Nothing more. Then you won't mind dissolving that partnership, Blackwood said smoothly. Selling the store to someone who can provide proper security and management. We'll make sure you're compensated fairly. Compensated? Eliza laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to her own ears. You mean you'll buy my father's legacy for pennies on the dollar, then run me out of town like you planned from the beginning? We're trying to protect you. You're trying to steal from me. Let's at least be honest about that. She stood, grabbing her crutches, her whole body shaking with rage. My father built that store from nothing. He worked himself to death to give me a future, to give me a place in this world despite my damaged legs. And you want to take it because I had the audacity to fight back when you tried to dispose of me. Miss Hartwell, please sit down, Mayor Walsh said. No, I'm done sitting quietly while you decide my fate. I'm done being treated like a child or an invalid or a burden. Eliza moved toward the door, her crutches striking the floor with sharp cracks. The store is mine. The partnership stands. And if Dutch comes back, we'll deal with him the same way we dealt with him yesterday, with bullets and courage, not cowardice and excuses. If you walk out that door, we'll force a sale, Blackwood threatened. We'll get a court order, have you declared incompetent. You won't have a choice. Eliza turned to face him. Then do it. Prove to everyone in Willow Ridge what you really are. Prove that you're willing to destroy a grieving woman to line your pockets. I'm sure that'll do wonders for your reputation. She walked out before they could respond, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She'd just declared war on the most powerful men in town. She'd as good as guaranteed they'd come after her with everything they had. But she'd also stood up for herself in a way she'd never managed before. She'd claimed her worth, her right to exist, her refusal to be erased. Outside the hotel, she found Deputy Clay Matthews waiting with a grim expression. Miss Hartwell, need to talk to you about yesterday. If this is about pressing charges against Dutch, it's about pressing charges against you and Rowe. For fraud. Matthews looked uncomfortable. Town clerk checked the partnership documents you submitted, contacted the notary whose seal was on some of the papers. Turns out that notary died 6 months ago. The world tilted. Eliza grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. I don't understand. The documents are fake, forged, which means you and Rowe lied to the council, falsified official records, and committed fraud. Matthews pulled out a pair of iron handcuffs. I'm real sorry, Miss Hartwell, but I'm going to have to place you under arrest. Everything Eliza had fought for, everything she'd risked, came crashing down around her. The store, the partnership, the desperate gamble to save her future, all of it built on lies that had finally been exposed. She thought about running, thought about fighting, thought about the promise she'd made to Caleb just hours before. Then she held out her wrists. All right, let's get this over with. As Matthews locked the cuffs around her wrists, as he led her down the street toward the jail while townspeople stared and whispered, Eliza felt a strange sort of calm settle over her. She'd fought. She'd lost. But she'd gone down swinging, and somehow that felt like victory enough. The jail cell smelled of damp stone and despair. Eliza sat on the narrow cot, her crutches leaning against the wall, and stared at the iron bars that separated her from freedom. She'd been here for 3 hours, long enough for the initial shock to wear off and the reality to set in. She was a criminal now, a forger, a fraud. Everything the council had ever believed about her inadequacy had been proven true. The outer door creaked open. Footsteps approached, uneven and labored. Then Caleb appeared, leaning heavily against the bars, his face pale beneath the bruises, his bandaged shoulder seeping fresh blood through his shirt. You shouldn't be out of bed, Eliza said. Neither should you be in a cell. His voice was rough with pain and anger. I told Matthews it was all me, the forgeries, the fake documents, everything. I told him you didn't know. And did he believe you? No, because you're too smart not to have known. Because anyone with eyes could see we were in it together. Caleb gripped the bars with his good hand. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Yes, you did. We both did. We knew the risks when we started this. Eliza stood, moved closer to the bars. What happens now? Judge arrives in 2 days. Matthews says we'll both face charges. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Could be 5 years in territorial prison if they want to make an example of us. 5 years. Eliza tried to imagine it. 5 years locked away, her youth wasted, her father's store sold off and forgotten. By the time she got out, she'd be nearly 30, with a criminal record and no prospects. The institution in Denver would look like paradise by comparison. There's another option, Caleb said quietly. Matthews stepped out for a drink, left the keys on his desk. We could be 10 miles away before he even notices we're gone. Eliza looked at him sharply. You want to escape? Add jailbreak to our list of crimes? I want to survive. We're not going to get a fair trial here, Eliza. Blackwood owns the judge. He'll make sure we're convicted, make sure we're sent away for as long as possible. Our only chance is to run. Run where? They'll send marshals after us. We'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives. Better fugitives than prisoners. Caleb's eyes were desperate. Please, we can go west, change our names, start over somewhere no one knows us. Montana, maybe, or Oregon. Places so remote they'll never find us. It was tempting. The keys were right there, freedom within reach. They could be gone before Matthews returned, could disappear into the vast wilderness that still covered so much of the frontier. Eliza had become good at surviving against impossible odds. Maybe she could learn to survive this too. But running meant abandoning everything her father had built, meant letting Blackwood win, meant spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, always afraid, always alone except for Caleb and the weight of their shared crimes. No, she said softly. I'm not running. Eliza. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting other people decide what I'm worth. She moved closer to the bars until only inches separated them. You should go. Take the keys. Take your horse. Ride as far as you can. But I'm staying to face this. You'll go to prison. Maybe. Or maybe I'll fight. Maybe I'll make so much noise that Blackwood can't bury me quietly. Maybe I'll force this town to look at what they're doing and actually see it. Her voice strengthened. I shot at a man yesterday, Caleb. First time in my life I've ever fired a gun. And you know what I felt? Power, control, choice. I'm not giving that up to run and hide. Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. It was a broken, bloody thing, but real. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. Can it be both? Yeah, I suppose it can. He reached through the bars and took her hand. All right, we stay, we fight, but we do it smart. We need leverage, something to make Blackwood back down. Like what? He has all the power here. Not all of it. He's got secrets, too. Every man like that does. Caleb's expression turned calculating. When I was in Copper Springs, I heard things. Rumors about Blackwood and those mining claims Gates mentioned. Something about bribing federal land inspectors to certify worthless properties as valuable, then selling shares to investors back east. That's fraud, federal fraud. Exactly. If we can prove it, if we can show the council that their upstanding businessman is as dirty as we are, maybe we can force a stalemate. He drops the charges against us. We keep quiet about his schemes. That's blackmail. That's survival. Caleb squeezed her hand. You said you wanted to fight. This is how we fight. Before Eliza could respond, the outer door banged open. Deputy Matthews stumbled in, smelling of whiskey, his eyes unfocused. Behind him came someone Eliza never expected to see taking her side. Mrs. Chen, her face set with determination, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I bring food for prisoners, the old woman announced. Deputy says is allowed. Matthews waved vaguely at the cells. Yeah, fine. Just make it quick. I got a headache like you wouldn't believe. Mrs. Chen moved to Eliza's cell, passing the basket through the bars. Under the cloth, nestled among bread and cheese, was a folded piece of paper. Eliza palmed it smoothly, tucking it into her sleeve while making a show of examining the food. "You are kind woman," Eliza said in a loud voice. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Is no trouble. Everyone deserves kindness, even those who make mistakes, Mrs. Chen's eyes flicked meaningfully to Matthews, then back to Eliza. "I tell others in town about your situation. Many people not happy about arrest. Many people think counsel is too harsh. That's nice of them, but I don't think public opinion will help much." "You would be surprised what public opinion can do." Mrs. Chen patted her hand through the bars. "Have faith, Miss Eliza. Truth has a way of coming to light." After she left, after Matthews had settled back at his desk with his bottle, Eliza carefully unfolded the paper. It was a document, old and water-stained, but the words were clear enough. A contract between Thomas Blackwood and a federal land inspector named Horace Turnbull, dated 2 years prior. In exchange for $500, Turnbull had agreed to certify 3 mining claims as containing high-grade silver ore, despite evidence to the contrary. At the bottom of the page was Blackwood's signature, bold and undeniable. Eliza looked up to find Caleb watching her, his expression questioning. She turned the paper so he could see it through the bars. His eyes widened. "Where did she get this?" "I don't know, but it's exactly what we need." Eliza's mind was already racing ahead. "If we give this to Mayor Walsh, show him that Blackwood has been defrauding investors. Walsh might be in on it. Gates, too. They could all be profiting from those fake mining claims." Caleb thought for a moment. "We need to go higher, federal authorities, the territorial marshal." "Who won't arrive for weeks? We don't have weeks. The judge comes in 2 days." They sat in frustrated silence, so close to having leverage but unable to use it. The document was worthless if they couldn't get it to someone who'd act on it, and everyone with power in Willow Ridge was either corrupt or compromised. Then Eliza remembered something. The telegraph. "We can send a wire to the territorial capital, to the marshal's office. Tell them about the fraud. Tell them we have evidence. Even if they don't arrive before the trial, the threat of federal investigation might be enough to make Blackwood negotiate." "Matthews won't let us near the telegraph office." "No, but Mrs. Chen might." Eliza moved to the bars, called out to the deputy. "Mr. Matthews, I need to send a message to Mrs. Chen. Thank her for the food. Would you mind taking a note to her boarding house?" Matthews looked up blearily. "I'm not your messenger service, Miss Hartwell." "Please, it would mean a lot. She's been so kind, and I want her to know I appreciate it." Maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe Matthews wasn't as hard-hearted as his job required, but he sighed and pulled out a piece of paper. "Make it quick, and don't try anything clever." Eliza wrote carefully, her message innocuous on the surface, but clear to anyone who knew to read between the lines. She thanked Mrs. Chen for her kindness, mentioned how the bread reminded her of her father's favorite meals, and noted that she hoped someone would send word to her family about her arrest, particularly her cousin Martha, in the territorial capital who worked near the marshal's office. Eliza had no cousin Martha, but Mrs. Chen would understand. She'd proven herself far more resourceful than anyone gave her credit for. Matthews took the note without reading it carefully and left, muttering about needing fresh air. The moment he was gone, Caleb spoke urgently through the bars. "This is a long shot. Even if Mrs. Chen understands, even if she sends the telegram, the marshal might not care, might think it's a desperate ploy by criminals trying to avoid conviction." "It is a desperate ploy by criminals trying to avoid conviction," Eliza pointed out. "That doesn't make it wrong. Blackwood has been stealing from people for years. He deserves to be exposed. And if exposing him doesn't save us? If the judge convicts us anyway?" Eliza met his eyes through the bars. "Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have fought back instead of just accepting our fate. That's worth something, isn't it?" "Yeah," Caleb said quietly. "It is." The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Matthews brought food, brought water, ignored Eliza's questions about whether any telegrams had been sent or received. The town beyond the jail went about its business, and through the small barred window, Eliza could see people passing, some curious, some sympathetic, most just indifferent to the fate of the crippled girl who'd finally proven she was as incompetent as they'd always believed. But as afternoon bled into evening, something changed. The foot traffic increased. Voices rose in argument outside the jail. Then the door burst open and Thomas Blackwood stormed in, his face purple with rage, followed by Mayor Walsh and a pale, frightened-looking man Eliza didn't recognize. "Where is it?" Blackwood demanded, gripping the bars of her cell. "Where's the document?" Eliza kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, girl. Someone sent a telegram to the territorial marshal claiming I've been involved in land fraud. They mentioned a contract with Horace Turnbull." He shook the bars. "That contract was destroyed. I watched it burn 2 years ago. So how did you get a copy?" "I didn't get anything. I've been in this cell for a day and a half. How would I get documents?" Blackwood turned to Matthews. "Who's visited her? Who's been in this jail?" "Just Mrs. Chen bringing food, and Roe, but he didn't pass her anything. I was watching." Matthews looked nervous. "What's this about fraud, Mr. Blackwood?" "Nothing that concerns you. This is a private business matter." But Blackwood's eyes were desperate now, cornered. "The marshal is sending an investigator. He'll be here in 3 days. I need that document before he arrives." "I told you I don't have it." "Then who does? Who's helping you?" When Eliza didn't answer, Blackwood turned to Mayor Walsh. "We need to move up the trial, today. Right now. Get them convicted and sentenced before the federal investigator arrives." "We can't do that," Walsh protested. "The judge isn't here yet. We'd need to bring in a circuit judge from another district, and that could take— I don't care what it takes. These two need to be on a prison wagon before federal authorities start asking questions." Blackwood's mask of civility had completely crumbled, revealing the ruthless man beneath. "If they're convicted felons, their testimony against me becomes worthless. It's their word against mine, and mine carries more weight." The pale man, Turnbull, Eliza realized, spoke up nervously. "Maybe we should just give them what they want. Drop the charges. Let them go. If that document surfaces, we're all finished. Me, you, half the business owners in this town who bought shares in those mining claims." Blackwood spun on him. "Do you want to spend the next 10 years in a federal prison? Because that's what we're looking at if the truth comes out." Eliza felt a surge of hope. They were panicking, which meant the telegram had worked. Mrs. Chen had come through. Now she just needed to keep Blackwood off balance long enough for the investigator to arrive. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice carrying through the jail. "I think you're going to drop the charges against me and Caleb. I think you're going to let us walk out of here, and you're going to leave us alone from now on. Because if you don't, that document goes to every newspaper between here and Washington, and your career ends in scandal and federal prison. You're bluffing. You don't have the document anymore. You sent it with that telegram." "Did I? Are you sure? Maybe I sent a copy. Maybe I have the original hidden somewhere safe." Eliza smiled. "Only one way to find out. Drop the charges, leave us alone, and you never have to worry about it. Keep pushing, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man Thomas Blackwood really is." It was a complete bluff. The document was the only copy they had, and Mrs. Chen had it. But Blackwood didn't know that. And in his panic, he couldn't afford to take the risk. The silence stretched. Blackwood's face went through several shades of red before settling on a grayish pallor. Finally, he turned to Walsh. "Drop the charges. Let them go." "Thomas, we can't just— Drop them!" Blackwood's voice cracked. "Tell Matthews it was a misunderstanding. The documents were genuine after all. Whatever story you need to tell, tell it. But get them out of this jail and make this whole thing disappear." Walsh looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Blackwood's eyes stopped him. He nodded slowly. "Deputy Matthews, release the prisoners. The charges have been reconsidered." Matthews, thoroughly confused but willing to follow orders, pulled out his keys. "Yes, sir." "If you say so." The cell door swung open with a rusty squeal. Eliza grabbed her crutches and stood, hardly believing it was real. Caleb's cell opened next, and he emerged, moving slowly because of his injuries, but with his head held high. Blackwood stepped close to Eliza, his voice low and venomous. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but all you've done is make an enemy. I'll destroy you eventually. It might take months or years, but I'll find a way." "Maybe," Eliza said. "But you'll do it from a distance. You'll never touch my store, never interfere with my business, never threaten me again. Because the moment you do, that document goes public, and we both know you can't afford that." She pushed past him, Caleb at her side, and walked out of the jail into the dying light of day. The street was full of people: Mrs. Chen, Doc Morrison, several shop owners, even some of the ranchers who'd been customers of her father's store. They'd been waiting, Eliza realized, waiting to see what would happen. When she emerged free, a cheer went up. Not from everyone, plenty of faces remained disapproving or skeptical, but enough to matter. Enough to show that some people in Willow Ridge still believed in justice, or at least in giving a damaged girl a fighting chance. Mrs. Chen pushed through the crowd and embraced Eliza carefully. "I send telegram like you ask, and I keep documents safe, very safe." "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "You saved us." "You save yourself. I just help little bit." The old woman smiled. "Now you must decide. You stay in this town that treats you so badly, or you go make new life somewhere better?" It was the question Eliza had been avoiding. She was free, the charges were dropped, her store was still legally hers. But Willow Ridge had made its feelings clear. Most of the town still saw her as a burden, still believed she didn't belong. Staying meant fighting that perception every single day for the rest of her life. She looked at Caleb, who was watching her with those steady creekwater eyes. "What do you think?" "I think we've got choices now, real choices. We could stay, make a go of the store, prove everyone wrong. Or we could sell it, take the money, start fresh somewhere no one knows us." He paused. "Either way, I'm with you. If you want to stay and fight, I'll fight. If you want to leave, I'll leave. Your choice." Eliza thought about her father's store, about the years of work he'd put into building something solid and respectable. She thought about his blood on the floorboards, about his final words, about the promise she'd made to honor his memory. But she also thought about the whispers, the pity, the constant battle to prove her worth to people who'd already decided she had none. She thought about Dutch and his gang, still out there somewhere, waiting for another chance at Caleb. She thought about Blackwood's threat, his promise to destroy her eventually, and she realized something that felt like freedom. "I want to leave," she said, "not because I'm giving up or running away, because I'm choosing something better, choosing a place where I can build a life instead of constantly defending my right to have one." Caleb's smile was genuine, relieved. "Where do you want to go?" "West. Somewhere new, somewhere growing, somewhere that needs people who can work hard and don't care about what's proper or expected." She looked at the store, at the building that had been her entire world for 9 years. "We'll sell it. Get a fair price finally. Use the money to start something new." "A trading post, maybe," Caleb suggested. "Somewhere along a new trail or near a growing settlement, someplace where we can build from the ground up." "Together," Eliza said. "As actual partners this time. No lies, no fraud, just honest work." "Together," Caleb agreed. They spent the next week settling their affairs. Doc Morrison bought the store, paid a fair price for it too, more than Eliza had expected. Sheriff Briggs recovered enough to sit up and shake Caleb's hand, thanking him for trying to protect him, even if it hadn't worked out perfectly. The federal investigator arrived and spent 3 days interviewing people about Blackwood's mining scheme. Eliza gave him the document, told him everything she knew, and watched with satisfaction as Blackwood's empire began to crumble. On the morning they left, Eliza stood in front of her father's grave one last time. She'd brought wildflowers, placed them carefully on the mound of earth that was slowly settling. "I'm leaving, Papa," she said quietly. "I know you wanted me to stay, to keep the store, to maintain what you built, but I can't. This town will never see me as anything but a burden, and I'm tired of trying to change their minds." She touched the headstone. "I hope you understand. I hope wherever you are, you know I tried. I fought as hard as I could, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is know when to walk away." The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Eliza chose to believe it was her father's way of saying he understood, that he approved, that he wanted her to be happy more than he wanted her to maintain his legacy. Caleb waited at the cemetery gate with 2 horses. He'd spent the last week training the gentler of the 2 to accept a special saddle he'd designed, one with extra support and straps that would help Eliza stay mounted despite her damaged legs. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than she'd ever hoped for. "Ready?" he asked as she approached. "As I'll ever be." He helped her mount, careful of her legs, making sure she was secure before handing her the reins. Then he swung up onto his own horse and looked at her with a question in his eyes. Eliza took a deep breath, looked back at Willow Ridge one last time, at the buildings and streets that had been her prison and her battlefield, and then turned her horse west. "Let's go," she said. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, two figures growing smaller against the vast landscape. Behind them, Willow Ridge continued its daily routines, already forgetting the crippled girl and the cowboy who dared to challenge its certainties. But ahead lay possibility, territory so new and unmapped that no one could say who belonged there and who didn't. 3 months later, they reached a growing settlement in Montana Territory, a place where the railroad was coming and new businesses were needed. Using the money from the store, they built a trading post at the crossroads of two major trails. Eliza managed the books and the finances, negotiated with suppliers, built relationships with customers. Caleb handled the physical labor, the heavy lifting, the security. Together they created something neither could have built alone. The trading post prospered. Within a year, they'd expanded it to include a small restaurant where travelers could get hot meals. Within 2 years, they'd built a house behind the trading post, a house designed with Eliza's needs in mind, with ramps instead of stairs and wide doorways for her crutches. And somewhere in those 2 years, the partnership evolved into something more. It happened gradually, in shared glances and comfortable silences, and hands that found each other across the dinner table. On a spring evening, much like the one when they'd first met, Caleb asked Eliza to marry him, and she said yes without hesitation. They married in the trading post, surrounded by customers who'd become friends and neighbors who'd never known them as anything but equals. There was no pity in anyone's eyes, no whispers about propriety or capability, just celebration of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and refused to let the world's cruelty define their worth. Years passed. The trading post became a landmark, then a cornerstone of the growing town that built up around it. Eliza and Caleb raised 2 children, a daughter with her mother's determination and a son with his father's quiet strength. They taught their children that worth wasn't measured in straight spines or unblemished pasts, but in courage and kindness and the willingness to fight for what mattered. Dutch and his gang never found them. Either they'd given up the search or met their end somewhere on the lawless frontier. Eliza preferred not to know. That chapter of their lives was closed, and she had no desire to reopen it. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep and the trading post was quiet, Eliza would sit on the porch with Caleb and watch the stars. On those nights, she'd think about her father, about Willow Ridge, about the girl she'd been who thought her broken legs defined her entire existence. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked one such night. "Leaving everything behind?" Eliza considered the question. She thought about the store, about her father's grave, about the life she might have had if she'd stayed and fought. Then she looked at her home, her family, her thriving business, her partner who'd become her husband. "No," she said, "I don't regret it at all, because the girl nobody wanted became the woman who chose her own future, and that's worth more than any store or any town's approval." Caleb took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. "I'm glad you chose me. I'm glad you stopped running long enough for me to catch you." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd been broken and discarded by the world they'd left behind, but who'd found redemption in building something new. The frontier was hard and unforgiving, but it was also honest. It didn't care about Eliza's legs or Caleb's past. It cared only about what they could create with their minds and their hands and their stubborn refusal to quit. In the distance, a coyote howled. The wind carried the scent of pine and possibility. And Eliza Hartwell Rowe, the crippled girl who'd become a woman of substance and strength, smiled in the darkness and knew she was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone else had decided her worth, but because she'd claimed it herself. Not because the world had made space for her, but because she'd carved out that space with her own 2 hands. Not because someone had rescued her, but because she'd chosen to ride forward anyway. The cowboy had placed her on his horse and ridden away from everything that had tried to destroy her. But in the end, it was Eliza who'd saved herself. And that made all the difference.